We are live. Hey, welcome to episode 5 of the Dynasty Dad podcast. My name is Michael Royer. You can find me on Twitter at Dynasty_DadFF. I'm excited because we got another great guest here for you tonight. But before we do that, I want to drop a couple of, you guys have been so fantastic with the Apple iTunes reviews. I'm going to have to break it into 2 segments, but I mean, 5 episodes in and you guys have left 12 5-star reviews. And I cannot thank you guys even more for that because that's phenomenal. I want to read a couple of them here. And I want to, again, tell you my appreciation for that. So the first one comes from Toxic Pepsi 27. By the way, don't drink that. It sounds pretty rough. But we have Mike has great analysis on players. Exactly. Has great analysis on players. Content is clear and to the point. Definitely worth a listen. So thank you, Toxic Pepsi. The next one is from Alex Anna Jordan. The Dynasty Dad loves fantasy football and it shows. He has deep insight, takes the time to really research what he's saying. Great if you're new to Dynasty fantasy football or if you're a veteran just looking to up your game. And the last one I'm going to read here is from @BallroomBell. Dynasty Dad goes above and beyond in his research, and he's always ready to jump in and help listeners with their questions. Super nice guy, dad jokes all aside. So thank you very much for those kind words. Speaking of kind words and positive influences, I want to bring on a special guest here. You know, I met him in we had the Dynasty Dad the group chat there where we were doing for the Fantasy Cares Eliminator, and I was on a podcast with him recently. So the special guest is a QCL member, a SFBX participant, and really just one of the most overall positive influences on Twitter that I've come across. That's Commissioner Breeze. How you doing tonight?
Doing good, Dynasty Dad. Thanks for having me on once again.
Yeah, we're excited. I mean, you and I had a good rapport there when we were on at P2W there a couple of weeks ago. And I was like, I got to get you on here, you know, because we started talking a little bit. And, you know, I'm a father of 4, and you're the only person on Twitter so far who trumps me with that. You're a father of 5, correct?
That is correct.
That is awesome. One thing we like to talk about on the Dynasty Dad podcast is just a little bit of, you know, your fantasy football upbringings, like how you got started in fantasy football, how you tie in your children or anything that, you know, experiences that you've had over the years to where you are now.
Yeah, sure. I started playing fantasy football around 2012, right before I started having children. So things were quite different back then compared to now. So over the years, as I've learned and grown during my time playing fantasy football, my kids, they usually sit down with me, watch the games, ask me questions, wondering why I'm jumping up and down whenever one of my players make a big play or score a touchdown. I just say, hey, that's my guy right there.
Yeah.
So my oldest, who is 7 going on 8 right now, she's a little bit more curious about, you know, the things that I'm doing when it gets as we get close to the season. Whenever I have to like leave to go to a pod, she's like, you know, Dad, where you going? Don't leave me. I want to listen, you know. But I'll tell her, you know, I can't have any interruptions while I'm doing this, you know. So that's pretty much some of the dad life stuff that I have going on with my kids right now in regards to fantasy football.
Yeah. As you can see behind me, I got my draft board here. And my kids actually did our first. This is our 5th year now. So your oldest is 7, my youngest is 7. So I'm showing my age here a little bit. I got 7, 9, 11, and 13. And they did their own draft. They do it every year, and we get together. And like they love seeing what I do. You know, when I have my home drafts and all my friends come over and we do those drafts, and we do it similar to that. You know, we get pizza this year. We got 25 tacos from Taco Bell because that's what they wanted.
Nice.
You know, we get the draft board, which I got from draftkits.co. If you guys haven't heard of them, they make the most fantastic draft boards right now. And if you guys go over there, I know it's middle of draft season, but if you hit them up, you know, this is a vinyl reusable board. They have the most fantastic products. And if you guys use the code DAD, you guys will get 10% off. So, you know, just by dropping my name, you get an extra 10%, and you will not be disappointed. I mean, they are definitely Dynasty Dad approved. But we do the draft, and every year, you know, we have prizes at the end. And this year it was so cool. My daughter, she's 11, and she went on Fantasy Pros ADP and started writing stuff down, right? So she came in with notes. Yeah. And then I put that commercial out there. I don't know if you saw it, but my middle son, Matthew, he's 9. He just got a Patrick Mahomes jersey for his birthday. And he's like, you know, I was like, I wear the Patrick Mahomes jersey, but I was like, with that number one pick, you know, I listen to my dad talk all the time. He says you can't take a quarterback, so I got to take Christian McCaffrey, you know. So it's just cool kind of like introduction to dad life in fantasy football. So enough about that. Let's jump into what everybody wants to hear about. Everybody wants to hear right now about those ADP bargains and those guys that you and I want to buy up at great costs. I mean, everybody knows you get McCaffrey, you get all those guys early, but let's talk about some bargains here in drafts. Everyone's really jumping into their home leagues or their redraft leagues, and they want to hear some of these names that are going to win you guys some championships if you guys listen to us. We have a lot of 20 plus fantasy experience here between the two of us. So let's drop some info on them. So the first one is my first ADP bargain. We'll start with the quarterbacks because that influences the other positions the most. But I'm coming in with Cam Newton. Cam Newton right now in Fantasy Pros is an ADP of 19. So you do not need to take him with your QB1. I know there's a lot of people that are a little bit worried. Can he still run it? Does he still have those legs? But at QB 19, you're not taking him as your QB1. In a 2 quarterback, he's your back end QB2, or in a 1 quarterback, he's your backup. And when I want my backup quarterbacks in a 1 quarterback league, I want the highest upside possible. I don't want that safe, boring floor Derek Carr in a 1 quarterback league. I want a guy who, if I have Drew Brees and he goes down, I know Cam Newton's going to be able to come in and put up those numbers. And if you look at what he's done over the past couple of years, obviously 2019, that's a bit of a wash. But 2018 finishing as the QB 12, 2017 is the QB 2. And, he has that floor of 400 rushing yards that you're looking for. I know the guy you're going to be talking about has that nice rushing floor too. And when I'm drafting quarterbacks, I want a guy with a high floor when it comes to rushing yards and a high upside when it comes to what he can do with the football. What do you think of Cam Newton this year? Can you hear me? We still got you? Can you hear me?
Barely.
Barely? All right. We'll just pause it up here and see what's going on. I got everything off here on my end, so we should be okay. Yeah, Wi-Fi's off. How about now?
I can hear you now.
All right, good deal. So I went with the first guy here with, my bargain is Cam Newton at QB 19. He gives you that high upside floor. Why don't you tell us who your big QB bargain is for the 2020 season?
Well, for me, like you said, when you're looking for a quarterback a little bit later in draft, oh, sorry, you there?
Yeah, we're good. We're good.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Having a little bit of connection issues here, but the guy who I wanted to talk about was Daniel Jones. Right now he's going at QB 16 in Fantasy Pros. Last season when he was the starter, he showed flashes, what he can do both running and passing the football. I believe, going into this season, with the new offensive coordinator and Jason Garrett and with his full complement of weapons, I really think he can take a step forward. I know some people might be scared off with his early season schedule. It's not ideal, but again, where you're drafting him at, for your team, he's not somebody you necessarily have to start right away. But, any event that your QB1 goes down, he's somebody that you can plug in. And, because, with quarterbacks, it's arguably the most replaceable position to find fantasy production. So if some reason he don't work out, you can go find, get a Gardner Minshew or Ryan Fitzpatrick or whatever the case may be. But another reason why I like him too, going into year 2, I really feel like he's going to have a strong connection with Evan Ingram. I think Evan Ingram is going to be his security blanket, which is going to help both him and Daniel Jones floor, in my opinion. So that's a guy who I am looking at as a ADP bargain at the quarterback position.
I absolutely love it. Both of those guys are my Scott Fishbowl quarterbacks because I wanted to play that high upside. And you bring up several great points there. I mean, he had 4 games where he was winning you weeks where, depending on what your scoring format, it was 35 plus fantasy points where he really balled out. Evan Ingram is the key to his success, though. I think you're right with that because the turnovers got to get cut down. There was a lot of fumbles. He held onto the ball too long, a lot of interceptions. And I think that comes from not having a real security blanket because Saquon was beat up. Evan Ingram was out of the lineup. Even Golden Tate was out of the lineup. Sterling Shepard. It was only really Darius Slayton there towards the end. And he was forcing the ball, but he's proved that he can really ball out. To what you said about, what I'm advocating for everybody is if you don't get Mahomes or Lamar Jackson or Deshaun Watson or one of them early guys, wait. Take that 12th quarterback off the board as Matthew Stafford, because we both love Matthew Stafford.
Yes,
He was on pace for that QB2. Take Matthew Stafford, and if you don't trust him, take Daniel Jones or Cam Newton. Now all of a sudden you have two high upside, high floor, high upside type quarterbacks where you're going to get similar type production, and that's how fantasy football is won. If you can wait so many rounds deeper. I mean, I feel like you can get Stafford a good 6-7 rounds after you get Mahomes. Build up the rest of that lineup and really just watch your lineup soar. So those are two great quarterbacks. And you brought up Gardner Minshew. I think Gardner Minshew is the cheapest option there is at quarterback. And there's going to be a lot of negative game script there. I mean, he's going to be a guy that is going to be able to throw the ball in certain situations. Why don't we jump over to our wide receiver? You and I both, it was great to see, because this is a guy I've been just shouting from the rooftops. I love DJ Chark this year. And if Minshew's a guy that we see with some upside, why don't you tell me what you see with DJ Chark?
Yeah, so DJ Chark is a guy who I have recently started to rise on. I mean, he was a guy who I wasn't necessarily fading per se, somebody who I've been kind of watching from afar to see where his ADP would, stay steady or start rising. But surprisingly, he's right there for you at wide receiver 23, top of the 5th round. And, what he can do and what the production we've seen from him last year, I think that's a really good value. I mean, last year, up until week 14, he was the wide receiver 8 overall. Mm-hmm. So that kind of gives you an idea of what he can do with Gardner Minshew, who kind of they actually didn't even have much rapport going into the season because Nick Foles was the starting quarterback.
Right.
So
and I think
going into this season.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No worries. So going into this season, like you.
Sorry, I cut you off there, and then it just kind of it tapered off there. You were talking about the rapport with Gardner Minshew and DJ Chark.
Yeah, so going into the season, Nick Foles was the starting quarterback, so they didn't really have that much of a rapport going into the season. They just kind of clicked, once the team figured out that Gardner Minshew gave them the best chance to put them in a position to win games. So I like DJ Chark a lot going into this season. I think they can take another step forward with an even stronger rapport and connection because, like you said earlier, they will be in a lot of negative game scripts situations. So as a fantasy manager, you want that so you can have potentially put more points on the board for your fantasy roster.
Absolutely. I love that take. I mean, guy was over 70 receptions, over 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, and he is just a, speed burst score freak. You look at his Spark X score and he's in that 99th percentile as a 6'3" wide receiver who can really do it all. We both love DJ Chark, and what I'm really advocating for the listeners is to take those wide receiver ones on their team who you can have as a wide receiver 3. And when you and I were on P2W 2 weeks ago, he was going as wide receiver 27. So people are starting to get that trend. He's starting to move in at wide receiver 3. Now he's a wide receiver 2. But I feel like in some drafts, you can take him as your wide receiver 3. And I'm perfectly comfortable with him as my wide receiver 2 because I think he's going to put up borderline wide receiver 1 numbers. I have him in my top 15 right there with Terry McLaurin. And DJ Chark is, I see a little bit of the old school, no one ever liked Blake Bortles and Allen Robinson back in the day. I mean, everybody loved Robinson, but I can see some of that. I can see some of that. I can see a scenario where Minshew's playing for his job, and he's not going to be worried about throwing interceptions as much late as
Right.
trying to get his team back in the game. And the guy he's going to target in those situations is DJ Chark. I mean, there is not a lot else there. There's Chenault and there's Dede Westbrook, but he's going to be the primary guy. And last year, 118 targets. I could easily see that over 130 this season.
Yeah. I mean, and to kind of put the icing on the cake, I mean, in the Scott Fishbowl draft, I got him at 7-11 as my wide receiver 3 on my team. So I was like, that's a crazy value right there.
Right. And that's a great point, because the one thing, and I did it in Scott Fishbowl, and I'm doing it in all my drafts right now, is heavy RB early, because those wide receivers are so deep. You know, you can get in that particular draft, I got Zeke and Eckler and Jonathan Taylor and early on, and I was able to wait and get guys like Cortland Sutton and DJ Chark in that 6th, 7th round. And those guys they're going to be up there. They're going to be top 20 wide receivers. And that really gives you an opportunity to really build a positional advantage at running back and still be competitive at wide receiver. 2 more guys that are in that realm. Why don't you talk to me a little bit about Michael Gallup? You know, I feel like the community really soured on Michael Gallup when CeeDee Lamb was drafted, and you could buy him cheap. And I mean, super cheap. And it's ridiculous for a guy that had over 1,000 yards, 66 receptions and 6 touchdowns. And he's only 23 years old. Tell me about Michael Gallup.
Yeah, so I was one of those people initially that had soured on Michael Gallup when the Cowboys had drafted CeeDee Lamb. I'm like, oh man, you know, I didn't really know what to make of the situation for a good while in the season, but you know, as time has come on and you got the whole pandemic situation, it kind of made me realize, you know, you have these rookie wide receivers like CeeDee Lamb, who hasn't had the best opportunity to establish that rapport with Dak Prescott. So that right there is an advantage for Michael Gallup. Now, Michael Gallup right now, you know, he's wide receiver 32, according to Fantasy Pros. I think that is an insanely undervalued spot where he is going for the upside and how safe he is as a player. I mean, you talk about hammering running backs early. You know, you got Amari Cooper going 3rd, sometimes early 4th round, depending on, you know, the draft or whatever. But he has similar, you know, production to Amari Cooper, and he's going 3 to 4 rounds later. He had 142 targets. That's more than some the wide receiver ones on their own team.
Yeah, Mike McCarthy's saying that he sees him as a wide receiver 1. And, you know, I love CeeDee Lamb, and don't get me wrong, CeeDee Lamb is the future. I mean, that he is one of my favorite, if not my favorite wide receiver out of this class, and my number 1. But I think Michael Gallup, you know, got knocked back quite a bit there. And like you're saying, you could get him as a late wide receiver 3. In some drafts, your wide receiver 4. And my FFPC, I got him as my wide receiver 6. You know, and I already pounded the table with my running backs. Now I got that kind of upside with a guy like that who, you know, in an offense, give me the wide receiver 2 on an offense like Dallas rather than the wide receiver 1 on a low production offense, you know, like San Francisco or something like that. You know, he's going to be a lock for well over 100 targets. And there's 180 vacated targets. That's what made no sense is, yes, CeeDee Lamb comes in, but is he going to get 180 targets as a rookie? I mean, you know, Blake Jarwin might get a little bit more, but I mean, how much else is going on in that offense aside the big 3? And that's a great one with Michael Gallup. The other guy I really like in that same situation where you can get him as wide receiver 31 right now is Hollywood Brown. I know, you know, he was banged up his rookie year, but he came in weighing $160. I mean, $160 in the NFL. And I always talk about on the Dynasty Refinery, those small, fast guys, they come in hot, right? And then they get injured and they get banged up, and it's not the same because they win with their speed. So, you know, if you take those first 4 games last year, he was on pace for 66 receptions, 1,000 yards, and 6 touchdowns, almost identical to what Michael Gallup put up. But he got injured. He had that small frame. And my man has put on 23 pounds of pure muscle. I mean, I was looking at his workout regime, and it was wake up at 7:30 and eat 4 raw eggs, 9:30 protein shake, and this. 11:30 it was chicken and fish and more veggies. Every 2 hours he's eaten and put on 23 pounds of muscle. The best part was he put it out there. He's still running a 4.3. He's running a 4.3 with 23 more pounds. You and I put on 23 more pounds. So it's we're gonna add 4.3 to our 40 time.
Yeah.
But I mean, my man comes out, he's straight yoked, and he's the wide receiver one on that team. Mark Andrews is going to be there, and you could argue that, but I want those wide receiver ones on a prolific offense. And a lot of people are saying they think Lamar Jackson might tone back the running a little bit more, and there might be more passing opportunities because they're going to key on that. And a guy that could really explode that you get at wide receiver 31 is Marquise Hollywood Brown.
And then just to add on what you were saying, they talk about, wanting to pass the ball more this year in Baltimore. Earlier today with the news that Earl Thomas got released by the team, that's a hole in their secondary.
Yeah.
So now it can weaken their defense where they might be in more situations where they will have to pass the ball, and that's going to just put Hollywood Brown in a position to have more opportunity to get targets and, make big plays on the field, which he's accustomed to doing.
He's hungry. I mean, a guy that's willing to try to do that, to put on 23 pounds to be great. And that's what he wants to do. And I mean, I know there are some people that say he reminds him of a younger Antonio Brown, hopefully not the same trajectory late in his career, but he came in that same kind of, obviously they're cousins, and he had that work ethic in the beginning and they were working out together. And I feel like he's being slept on, at wide receiver 31. All three of those guys are wide receiver 3s that I'm more than comfortable being as wide receiver 2s who are going to put up numbers for you guys. So, pick those guys up. Moving on to the running back position. Now, that's what everybody wants. That's what everybody finds as those sexy position. Those are the guys the cornerstones. We got 3 guys here, 1 in the teens and 2 in the 20s here, who I feel like are really high upside for where you're going to get them. The first guy I'll talk about, and I'm not really into him in Dynasty. I'm going to be honest. I was on GOAT District and I kind of roasted them a little bit because they were giving me a hard time. But Chris Carson is not my Dynasty running back. But in redraft, I mean, he's going as the RB16 coming off, an RB1 season again, 3rd most yardage after contact with 905 yards, 5th in broken tackles, similar numbers to Joe Mixon last season. And Joe Mixon is going at, end of the 1st. You can get Chris Carson at the end of the 3rd into that 4th round. And what he was able to do with that offensive line, and I believe that offensive line is improving, but he averaged 4.4 yards per carry. But the interesting thing is, on next gen stats, which I'm really starting to get into those, the expected yards per carry based off the offensive line work was 3.9. So you're talking about he's an average half a yard per carry he's adding to the mix, and that's the kind of running back I want on my team. 278 carries, over 1,200 rushing yards, 7 touchdowns. And people don't realize he had 37 receptions. I think people kind of look at him at that running back who doesn't catch passes, but 37 is enough to keep you at that nice, safe floor.
No, I agree totally. A lot of people scared off about Carson's injury history, but as of right now, he's good to go. Pete Carroll, he loves him. In spite of his fumbling issues, he's stuck behind this guy. And, right now, Rashad Penny, he's not going to be available for the season to start. Carlos Hyde, he's pretty much an insurance policy. So what is there not to like about Chris Carson? I mean, for where he's going, it's a ton of upside in Chris Carson going late 3rd round, sometimes early 4th round, depending on the draft, who can return RB1 value. So I like the pick a lot.
Good. I mean, you want those running backs on those top 10 offenses. And Seattle is a run heavy offense. They're going to be in the red zone repeatedly. And Chris Carson's a guy who's always a threat for double-digit touchdowns. He finished in the top 10 last year and he only had 7 touchdowns. I can see him having 10, 12 touchdowns without, breaking a sweat. I see that as a real possibility. Speaking of touchdowns and, 1st and 2nd down work, I know you were big into the Tampa Bay offense last year. I heard you talk about that. Let's talk about the Tampa Bay running game right now for this year.
Yeah, sure. So Ronald Jones, he's a name that somewhat polarizing in the fantasy community, but, I had a chance to kind of dig a little bit into Ronald Jones, and, he right now is on at the RB30, according to Fantasy Pros. He had 40 receptions last season with Jameis Winston as his quarterback. That was more than Mark Ingram. That was more than Josh Jacobs, more than Raheem Mostert, David Montgomery. He had close to, you know, he had 200 touches basically on last season. I think he can get to the 220, 225 range with Tom Brady at the helm. It's a good offense. They're going to be in positive game scripts, for most of their games, which would benefit, Ronald Jones. Bruce Arians came out and said that he likes him. He's their guy. Today, Ronald Jones had a bad practice, dropped a couple of
I saw that.
passes, but so did Keyshawn Vaughn and LaShawn McCoy. But everybody wanted to make a big deal when it was Ronald Jones who dropped the passes. But I think for where he's going in the early 7th round, he's at worst, a low-end RB2. If you're somebody who want to go, RB0 to start your draft, this is a guy you want to target because he's a lot safer than people want to give him credit for. So I like Ronald Jones. I'm personally going to be trying to get him. I got a share in the QCL draft that you talked about at the top of the show. But yeah, I like him.
I do too. I mean, I've really come around. I was a little sour on him last year, but everybody was all about Keyshawn Vaughn, and I didn't see it. A 4th round draft pick with minimal athleticism, as far as compared to Ronald Jones. And now they're saying that Keyshawn Vaughn, they asked Bruce Arians, and he said he's going to be involved in the kick return game. He did not talk about anything as far as being a running back. And Ronald Jones has become a buy. And speaking of this, we're talking redraft right now, but I got a trade on my inbox right now. N'Keal Harry, who we talked about on P2W, and a 3rd round pick, or Ronald Jones. And this is a extremely running back needy team where my wide receivers are stacked. Would you be willing to give up Harry and a 3rd for Rojo? Did you get me on that one? Can you hear me?
I caught the tail end. You said,
Yeah.
would you give up who?
I got a dynasty trade sitting in my inbox, and it's N'Keal Harry in a 3rd or Ronald Jones, and it's a very wide receiver needy team, or very running back needy team. We'll skip that part. We'll skip that part for editing.
I don't think I can do that. I heard N'Keal Harry in the 3rd and something else, but I don't think I'll do that.
Yeah, I'm kind of sitting in between there. But I do love Ronald Jones' upside for the 2020 season. And you brought up a great point. I mean, I feel like 0 RB is a real misnomer. Like people are, but if you're willing to, like I was talking about pounding the running back table early. I'm seeing another one where if you got picks like 1 through 3 and you take Christian McCaffrey, and then at that 2-3 turn, you start pounding a couple wide receivers, like 3 of them in there. That's where you can get guys like Ronald Jones, like you said, in the 7th round, or this next guy who, I know you're from Detroit, but DeAndre Swift is going at RB27 right now. This is a guy who is going to win you leagues. This is one you have to listen to here, where DeAndre Swift's upside is so astronomical. I feel like people are worried that Kerryon Johnson's in the way, and Kerryon Johnson sitting there with a knee brace, which my friend that's a doctor said that's more for his mental stability than it is for, preventing injury. And DeAndre Swift is in an offense that you and I both agree should be explosive, an offense that has Matthew Stafford. It's got Kenny Galladay. It's got Marvin Jones. It's got TJ Hawkinson. And now you throw into the mix DeAndre Swift. You have a absolute, RB stud in the making. Most of us had him as our RB1, going into the pre-draft process. And there shouldn't be anything that's really stopped us from believing that DeAndre Swift is that same player. It's just the situation that he went to is something that most of us are trying to avoid, just for the simple fact that it's a Matt Patricia offense. It's an offense in the past that has gone by committee. It won't be. Matt Patricia is playing for a job. Matt Patricia knows that if he wants to maintain his job, that offense is going to have to funnel through DeAndre Swift in the pass game, in the run game, and they're going to have to use him as one of the most complete running backs in this class. And I know you're a big fan of him. I know he's a guy that people in the community and their rookie drafts were getting extremely late. But at this point, as the RB27 in your redraft league, DeAndre Swift has to be owned. He has to be a guy that you're targeting. And I'm not going to go out of any of my redraft leagues without coming home with DeAndre Swift. See if we can get Commissioner Breeze back here in the room. while he's reconnecting to what's going on here, I wanted to talk to you guys, as I was talking about guys that are going to win you leagues. I want to tell you about TrophySmack.com. We talked about players that are going to win you those trophies. Right now, we partnered up again with TrophySmack.com. They make the greatest trophies. They make a phenomenal belt that we got for our Dynasty Refinery Listener League, Listener League 1, where it's a gold belt with our logo on there. They do the greatest work that I've seen, and if you guys go over there to TrophySmack.com and you guys enter the code Refinery from the other podcast, you guys will get a free championship ring, which is a $60 value just for using that code. So use the code Refinery. You guys will get that free championship ring. I know I'm going to use them for my trophies this year. And, I highly suggest that you use them as well. So draftkits.co and trophysmack.com, both of them Dynasty Dad approved. Make sure you guys look them up and add them to your Dynasty and fantasy repertoire. The last position we have here is we're going to talk about tight ends. And if you guys have listened to me, I've been guesting on multiple podcasts in the last 2 weeks. And the guy that I am all about at the tight end position is Mike Gesicki. He finished as a top 5 tight end down the stretch as the number 2 target in Miami. He's 6'6", 6'6", 247 pounds, and he runs a 4.5 40. He was at the 100th percentile in catch radius, which means no one has ever had that. 99th percentile in speed, burst, and agility scores. And now he's finally learning the position. That's scary. It is scary to me that he's entering that third year, learning the position. And last year, he was still able to put in 89 targets, 51 receptions, 570 yards, and 5 touchdowns as a sophomore. And he's running 71% of the routes right now for Miami. They're using him a lot more in line. I do not believe that Preston is going to be able to start the season as the wide receiver 2 in full form. I feel like Mike Gesicki is that number 2 guy behind Devontae Parker. And I think he has a sneaky good tight end 1 season here. And you can get him right now on an ADP on Fantasy Pros at tight end 15. So if you did not get one of those top 4 tight ends, if you did not get Kelsey, Kittle, Andrews, or Ertz, don't go reaching for all the rest of the guys. Don't go reaching for those middle Hunter Henry type players. Wait. Be the last guy in your board. Stock up the value at running back. Stock up the value at wide receiver. And then when it comes to an opportunity, you go and you grab Mike Gesicki because he is a guy that I believe is going to win you a title. He is that good. I can see a situation where he puts up 70 type receptions, 800 yards, and double-digit touchdowns. He's on the ascension. And in Dynasty, go buy him cheap. You can get him for a second-round pick. In redraft, we're talking about tight end 15 off the board, and that is a fantastic, fantastic value. We haven't had Commissioner Breeze come back on, but the guy that I know he wants to talk to you guys about, and I'll try to do it from his vantage point, is Chris Herndon. My co-host at the Dynasty Refinery absolutely loves Chris Herndon. Obviously, Commissioner Breeze loves him too. If he was here to come back, he would tell you about it. But we want to talk about a situation where a tight end can be the number 1 target. It is the Jets. You're looking at in 12 games as a rookie, he had 39 receptions, 502 yards, 4 touchdowns. And if we had that same kind of mentality, if he didn't have the year where he had the DUI and he sat out the entire year, we would be talking about Chris Herndon in a similar light to some of these top 8 tight ends, but we didn't. And what else is there with the Jets right now? I mean, it's Crowder, it's Mims, it's Perriman. It's nothing super exciting, and they're going to be in negative game script all the time. So Chris Herndon is someone that I advocate you guys go out and buy, in Dynasty, probably get him for a 3rd-round pick. In redraft, right now you can get him as the tight end 19. He's almost your back end tight end 2. And even if you don't draft him, a guy that on your waiver wire, just keep an eye on him because he's going to be doing some good things this year. So I want to thank you guys, for tuning in here. Commissioner Breeze he lost a little bit of internet connection. I know there's a lot of bad weather going around, but want to really talk to you guys and thank you guys again for the iTunes reviews. And I wanted to say, I'm going to read those aloud every week. I want you guys to be able to, be as interactive as possible with me. And when you put those 5-star reviews, I'm going to read them every single time, because that touches me right here. That's something that means a lot to me, and I appreciate when you guys do that. So thanks again for tuning in, and enjoy the process. See if we can get Breeze back in here. Hey, anybody got a question while we're waiting for Breeze? No questions. Breeze. Can you hear me?